Thank you, Nico, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank Nikos' good efforts and Capital Link in general for putting on this event today. Excellencies, ambassadors, distinguished guests, good morning to you all and thank you for being here. I'll endeavor to keep my introductory remarks brief, as no doubt our keynote speaker and esteemed panelists will make far better use of the limited time that we have. Throughout today's conference, under the overarching theme, Invest in Cyprus, a myriad of topics have been discussed, ranging from shipping, financial services, our long-standing role as a world-class international business center, and our growing appeal for multinationals as an ideal jurisdiction in which to establish regional headquarters. All these aspects are relevant to this session. The East Mediterranean, with Cyprus at its center, constitutes a new frontier for the energy sector, one that brings with it the promise of increased cooperation, stability, and prosperity for the region. And make no mistake, Cyprus is the linchpin for the realization of this potential as a natural energy hub. You've heard a great deal about the plethora of advantages and the benefits that Cyprus brings to the table, but perhaps our greatest asset is in fact our people. And there is no better example of the high caliber of our people than the many esteemed panelists who have traveled from Cyprus to be with us today. But none more so than our keynote speaker, His Excellency Minister of Energy, Commerce and Industry of the Republic of Cyprus, Yiorgos Lakkotrypis. Please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me also start by thanking the organizers, Nicolas, for the great organization, participation today, and of course, above all, thank you for taking the time to listen to the Cyprus story in all its different angles. Before I go into the energy sector, which is this session's topic, I did want to mention, just for a very few minutes, a few things about the sector which is actually delivering today, and it's actually driving most of Cyprus GDP, and that's the tourism sector. A lot has been mentioned by previous speakers, but I want to highlight that 2017 is anticipated to be a third year in a row that Cyprus will be delivering growth, both in arrivals and revenue, right? And yes, it is true. We heard earlier by McKinsey that arrivals have been growing faster than actual revenue. But let's not forget that Cyprus today is actually going for market share, right? We need to make up for the lost time, for the loss of competitiveness that Cyprus has witnessed over the past decade. It is true, we recognize that. So while we're heading for market share and eventually moving up the scale of arrivals to increase the revenue per head that we will be receiving, we are also promoting very heavily our infrastructure projects. Again, a number of them were mentioned about yachting tourism, about golfing, about integrated casino resort. And at the same time, I didn't hear anybody mention that, we are preparing a strategic plan. It's in the final stages for the next 10 years of Cyprus tourism. It is very important for us, not only to rebrand the country, to identify who we are, who our clientele would be, how do we diversify the arrivals that we receive from many different countries, and how do we attract more upscale, if you like, and compete in the upper end of the market. So please, when you're considering Cyprus as an investment opportunity, have a look at what we are doing in the tourism sector as well. So while the tourism sector is one of the sectors that's been delivering growth already, today, in the next few minutes, we will talk about an emerging sector, which for us holds promises for the future. And this is the oil and gas industry. And still in its infancy. I will just go ahead. I've prepared a couple of slides for you so that you can understand not just the Cypriot dimension, but also the regional dimension as well. So I'll very quickly give you a quick outlook on what's been happening in Cyprus, offshore. Cyprus has underwent 3 licensing rounds. In the first 2 licensing rounds, we awarded 6 blocks, out of which 5 licenses are still in effect. Those are blocks 2, 3, 9, block 12, and block 11. And in the third licensing round, we just ended a few weeks ago, and as a matter of fact, we will be signing the contracts on the 5th and 6th of April, next April. We will be awarding and signing block 6, 8, and 10. What you see on the screen are the licensees for each of the blocks. But equally important, beyond the licenses that have been awarded so far, I have to say that Cyprus has also, and let me show you this map, I think it's more telling, has also signed a number of delimitation agreements with our neighbors. We have signed a delimitation agreement with Egypt, Israel, Lebanon. We have signed a number of other agreements which are necessary to create what we call a predictable, transparent investment environment. Framework agreements for the unitization of possible joint reservoirs. One has been signed with Egypt, and there are 2 more being negotiated with Israel and Lebanon. And to be frank with you, when Zohr was discovered in Egyptian waters, just 6 kilometers from Cyprus' exclusive economic zone, this agreement that we have already with Egypt was put into effect, and we actually were entitled to the geological data which the Egyptian authorities were very happy to give to us. We are now under discussion again with the Egyptian authorities for another necessary agreement, which is the cross-boundary pipeline agreements, where the jurisdictions of each country start, where does it end? And of course, other agreements which the companies who are investing in Cyprus are telling us are necessary. Because it's no secret, the Eastern Mediterranean, emerging as it is, resembles geopolitically nothing. It's not the North Sea. Right? There are tensions, there are issues. So Cyprus here is playing a role in the middle, in the heart of things, trying to make it safe and predictable for companies to invest. Now, so far, there's been a number of discoveries in the Eastern Med, what I called exploration 1.0 took place, and we have had giant discoveries like Leviathan in Israel, big discovery in Israel, Tamar. We had the Aphrodite discovery in Cyprus. And Zohr in Egypt, another giant discovery, opened up what I call exploration 2.0. So now we are moving to what we consider is the second cycle of exploration in the Eastern Med, based on a completely new geological model, which was opened up because of Eratosthenes, a seamount which lies entirely into the Cyprus exclusive economic zone. You see it on the screen in shaded area. And this is part of the reason why the third licensing round was pretty successful. And we've managed to attract the likes again of Eni Total in block 6, of Eni in block 8, and of course one of your own here in the US, Exxon, Mobil and Qatar Petroleum in block 10. I had a meeting last week in my office with a very large British oil and gas company who didn't participate, but came to me and said that when Exxon makes a move, the industry notices. So there's no doubt for us that all eyes will be set on what will be happening, again, in what I call exploration 2.0 in Cyprus, but also in Eastern Med in general. Because if you can see that Israel is already having an open round right now of a licensing round. Lebanon is planning to launch one very soon. Egypt has an open round as we speak, right? You can see also for the first time Russian interests on the Egyptian exclusive economic zone with Rosneft. So it's getting pretty excited, both from a technical, economic point of view, but also from a geopolitical point of view. What's the Cyprus government's priorities? Exploration. Number one priority right now. This is why we launched the licensing round. We feel pretty pleased with the result, despite the depressed conditions which still exist in the oil and gas industry, with the prices of oil being at their lowest in a very, very long time. But also exploration, we need to identify what kind of resources are available in Cyprus, exclusive economic zone, that would help us also decide what exploitation ways we choose for those resources. We already have one discovery, I mentioned it, that was in the Aphrodite discovery. It's about 4.5 trillion cubic feet. It was discovered by an American company, again, Mobil, the very first one who actually took part in Cyprus, together with Delek, an Israeli company, and more recently Shell farmed out into that operation as well. And we are looking at being able to feed that gas, potentially in the Egyptian market. There are commercial negotiations happening as we speak for diverting that gas either into the LNG terminals in Egypt or into the domestic market there, which, despite what many people say, despite the Zohr discovery, there's still a lot of demand that needs to be fed into the country. And the third priority for us, so I mentioned exploration, I mentioned exploitation of our discovery. The third, and of course, very important priority for the countries to continue to expand its relationships, to create a transparent, predictable environment for companies to operate. We are asking companies in the Eastern Med to invest billions in exploration, potentially in infrastructure. So the least that we can do for them as countries, not only Cyprus, but the region as well, is to make it more predictable, more transparent, so they know what they're getting into, right? And of course, that leads me to the fourth priority, which is to exercise our role in the region. We're an EU member state, right? We feel we have a responsibility towards the East Med, but also we have a responsibility towards the EU for diversity of their supply. So we will be continuing to pursue, to exercise our role, to make the East Med important to the EU and the EU important to the Eastern Med. And we have a number of ways to do that, such as, for example, that we are part of projects of common interest of the EU. The EU is co-funding a number of strategic projects for us. I was discussing earlier with Ed Cox about the electricity cable that will be connecting Israel, Cyprus, and Greece, and other projects that are common. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EIB, are very, very heavily involved in seeing ways how we can finance the pipelines that will be required subsea, or the development of the field, or the fields that we will discover. Last but not least, the last piece of my opening statements here will be US and Cyprus. US and Cyprus. We're standing here, big delegation led by the president and three of his ministers, talking about overall cooperation in the energy is of fundamental importance, both for political, technical, financial reasons. Politically, we've been working very, very closely with the US government about the right of Cyprus to exploit its natural resources. It's no secret that a meeting in Davos last year, in 2016, sealed the meeting between the President and Vice President Biden, then sealed also the exploration round plans. So the US has been a strong advocate and supporter of what we're trying to do. Politically, we anticipate that we will have an equally strong relationship with the new administration as well. Business-wise, I mentioned earlier, Mobil Energy, an American company, made the first discovery in Cyprus, plays a pivotal role in Eastern Med in general, because they also are part of Leviathan and Tamar. Exxon, a new kid on the block for the Eastern Med, for Cyprus in particular. Also supporting companies like Schlumberger, Halliburton are now present in Cyprus. So we need the know-how, we need the deep technical expertise, but also the deep financial muscle that is required in this kind of operations. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude my remarks. I know we are short on time, and I'm sure you'll be looking forward to listen to the panelists, to say that we will continue the path towards exploring and developing our resources in the Eastern Med. Certainly there are exciting opportunities in the region, not only Cyprus, but overall the cooperation is there, and Cyprus plays a key role in being able to drive all the necessary investments to achieve everyone's goals. So with that, again, thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the rest of the session.
Well, good morning everyone again. My name is Stavros Pantzaris and I'm the country managing partner of EY in Cyprus, and I have the honor of monitoring the energy session. Earlier this morning, during my introductory remarks, I presented an overview of our promising hydrocarbon sector, which has firmly placed Cyprus on the energy map. A number of key international players from the US, from Europe, from Asia, and the Middle East have already set up their offices in Cyprus, have recruited local staff, and are planning their future activities on an island that can develop into a regional energy hub. Following the completion of the third licensing round, and as already stated by the Honourable Minister, 2017 is expected to be an active year in terms of offshore drilling. Eni and Total have already announced that they will proceed with their drilling program, perhaps to be followed by Exxon Mobil sometime in 2018. It is also important to note the entry of British gas earlier in 2016, which gives a positive note as regards exploitation of the existing discoveries in the Aphrodite gas field. Of course, we do have to appreciate that the energy sector today is rather complex and faces numerous challenges and risks in the region of the Eastern Mediterranean. All these points serve as an introduction of what we will be discussing during this session. Our today's panelists comprise distinguished guests from key international players who have already set footprint on the island. To my left is Mr. Ed Cox, Director of Mobil Energy, a US company, which was the first oil and gas company to enter the Cyprus Exclusive Economic Zone in 2008 and made a discovery in 2011. To his left is Mr. Gianni Di Giovanni, Chairman of Eni Petroleum Company Inc., an Italian energy group with significant drilling activity in the Eastern Mediterranean region. To his left is Mr. Jay Jackson, Europe-Caspian Exploration Manager of Exxon Mobil, a US energy giant, which has recently been awarded an exploration and exploitation license in Block 10 of the Exclusive Economic Zone of Cyprus. And to his left is Mr. Yaniv Friedman, Deputy CEO of Delek Group and Avner Oil and Gas Exploration, an Israeli energy group with active participation in the Leviathan Basin and, of course, in the Aphrodite gas field. I will start by giving the floor to Mr. Ed Cox for his introductory remarks and for presenting his views on how he sees the hydrocarbon sector developing both in Cyprus and the East Med region. We've heard from the Honourable Minister that monetizing the Aphrodite gas field is a top priority for the government. Is this in line with Mobil's priority as well? Ed?
Thank you very much. I'd first like to, the Minister said there were Exxon, Mobil goes, the rest of the industry follows. Well, in this case, it's where Mobil went. The rest of the industry follows. We do have an expertise in exploration. We're very good at it. And I know there are other majors that were in the area of the Eastern Mediterranean, offshore Israel, but in the end, it was Mobil that discovered the Mary B discovery and started producing from that in 2001, actually. And after that, discovered Tamar, just in time to take the place of Mary B after 10 years as it was running out. And Tamar is a 10 TCF, which will supply Israel and the Eastern Mediterranean for some time. And then, of course, Leviathan and Aphrodite, as was mentioned. In short, and I know time is limited here, so I want to, the geopolitical impact of these huge discoveries of gas have already been seen, whether it's respect to Israel's relationship with Turkey, Israel's relationship with Cyprus and Greece, and the economic impact has already been seen too. Israel projects that they're going to have a 1% extra growth, 1% absolute in their GDP per capita because of that. And of course, gas supplied to Jordan or to Egypt is going to have an immediate impact there from the Tamar field and then from the Leviathan field, which in 3 years will be online. As the minister said, Cyprus can have a key role in this, or as the person made introductory remarks, it's the linchpin to this area. Whether it is with respect to having resources, gas resources, Aphrodite and others that are here to be areas to be explored, whether it is working with the EU from a diplomatic point of view, certainly from a geographic point of view, from its business culture, which is very well developed, and the sense, as the minister expressed, the need for a stable political and legal environment in which the projects can be developed, because these are long-term projects. They take a huge commitment of expertise and capital to develop. And to do that, you need to be sure that there is a stable legal and political environment. And even in a country such as Israel, those who follow the development of the Leviathan realized that there were some hiccups there that caused the delay of a year. Antitrust, head of the antitrust division there differed. It had to go to the Supreme Court. The Prime Minister argued the case before the Supreme Court. Supreme Court made a decision against what he argued, and we had to redo things. And that meant that in order to have a stable legal structure to work with, it took an extra year to do it, even in the well-developed legal and political environment of Israel. So very interesting developments in this area, driven by these large gas discoveries. There has been, just to go historically, before we get too optimistic, there are those 2 LNG plants in Egypt that were expecting to be supplied with gas when there was excitement way back when, 20 years ago, and those LNG plants are now dead. And they're looking to have gas from these developments. So with all the optimism, we need a real dose of realism in order to put in the structures that are needed to get the investment that's needed in order to get this gas developed. And it can have, if developed, can have a huge impact on the beneficial impact on not just the economies, but the geopolitics of the Eastern Mediterranean.
Thank you, Ed. Moving to Mr. Giovanni, Chairman of Eni Petroleum Company, Inc., for his views on the development of the hydrocarbon sector in the East Med region. It is true that with Eni's dominant involvement now in 6 out of the 8 licensed blocks, the group is very important, if not critical, to Cyprus's future exploration and production of hydrocarbons. Gianni, can you please have your introductory remarks, and can you give us a flavor of your group's strategic priorities in the region? Is there another Zohr in the area?
We hope. So, thank you for the introduction of the statement introduction of the minister, because it was terrific. But let me say that we have learned the lesson here before your words, Minister, dear Minister, because the better significant of my words is impressed in a third slide of the Minister, because I know just only yellow flags in this map. So yellow flag probably is our flag, because we have invested in Cyprus since 2013, because we strongly believe in Cyprus for, you asked me the strategy, for reasons. Geographical reason, because please take a look to the Cyprus map. This is the real door from the west and the east. For geopolitical reason, because Cyprus probably became the place where all the issue from east and west can be treated and solved. And of course, last but not least, for geological reason, because this area is huge opportunity for oil and gas industry. So we hold and operate 3 blocks in offshore exploration in 2013. In 2016, we awarded 2 other offshore blocks more in following the competitive and international bid round, the 3rd international round. And very recently, Eni strengthens its presence in the country with a finalization of a farming agreement with Total to acquire 50% participation interest of Block 11 in offshore of Cyprus. Our strong presence in Cyprus confirmed the effectiveness of the Eni strategy in the Mediterranean, which keeps acquiring significant shares and use that knowledge base resulting from the intense activity related Zohr field. Is another step in our strategy towards the possible future definition of a powerful hub for a natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean, which could play an important role in the future of energy security of the area and, of course, the EU market.
Thank you, Gianni. Moving to Mr. J. Jackson, Europe Caspian Exploration Manager of Exxon Mobil, for his introductory remarks. As regards the operations of Exxon Mobil in Cyprus, Jay, what are the drivers for the group to turn its interest into Cyprus and the East Med?
Well, thanks, Stavros. It's a pleasure to be here today, and as you've heard, it's also very timely. Just back in December, ExxonMobil, with our partner Qatar Petroleum, were selected by the government of Cyprus to negotiate a contract to explore in offshore Block 10. And now, just 3 short months later, that contract has been approved by the government, and as you heard from the minister, will be signed in just a couple of weeks. And after that, we'll be able to start work on this very important project. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the representatives of the Cypriot government for the transparency, the hospitality, and indeed the drive they've shown to us throughout the entire bid and negotiation process. Now, ExxonMobil's no stranger to Cyprus. In fact, we've had a presence on the island for more than 60 years, selling petroleum products both wholesale and directly through more than 60 Esso-branded service stations. Our existing operations create jobs for more than 500 people, and we've also established several innovative corporate social responsibility programs in Cyprus in areas like health, road safety, education, and support of philanthropic institutions there. And after receiving the Cyprus Investment Promotion Authority or Agency Award in 2013, we were deeply honored just last year to be nominated for the CSR Company of the Year Award from In Business magazine. So what's new and what's coming up for us is the opportunity to broaden our participation in Cyprus's energy sector by exploring for offshore oil and gas. The world needs more and more energy to meet the population's growing demands, and so companies like all of ours on the podium here are constantly trying to find new and attractive market opportunities. So following the recent discoveries in the Eastern Med that you've heard about, we see similar potential offshore Cyprus and are excited at the prospect of bringing our expertise and our technology to the challenge of exploring there. But I do need to emphasize, as was pointed out, that we're just beginning our exploration work, so it's very early days. Only after seismic surveys have been completed, wells have been drilled, results analyzed, and economics scrutinized will we know whether or not that potential can truly be realized. So we bring to the task not just our scale as the world's largest publicly traded international energy company, but we also bring some of the best people in the industry. We bring our proprietary technology, our excellence in project execution, and a long history of developing mutually productive partnerships with governments the world over. And we also bring a world-class partner in Qatar Petroleum. Our partnership with QP dates back to the 1990s when we developed the North Field in Qatar, which is the world's largest non-associated gas field. QP is an outstanding company, and we're really looking forward to bringing our combined expertise to this task in Cyprus. So we begin our plans to explore offshore Cyprus with a view toward drilling our first exploration well in 2018, and we'll have additional wells to follow. We're currently participating in a seismic survey across a large area that includes our block, and that will help us with the specifics of well planning. So if we're successful in finding gas, our next step will be to work with the government to define the most optimal development solution for those resources. In the event that sufficient resources are found, one option could include the potential to bring gas to an LNG processing facility built in Cyprus that could export gas to the global market. Exxon, Mobil, and QP have unrivaled experience in the LNG business through our partnership in 12 LNG trains in Qatar, through jointly building the world's largest LNG ships, through developing 3 LNG import terminals, and truly in decades of shared experience in the LNG business. So we're very well positioned for the work ahead, and we're anxious to get started. It's important work, both as a potential boost to the economies of the Eastern Mediterranean, and also as an opportunity to continue to secure much-needed energy supplies for the world's future. So we look forward to what we hope will be a long and successful partnership with the government of Cyprus.
Thank you, Jay. Moving to Mr. Yaniv Friedman, Deputy CEO of Delek Group and Avner Oil and Gas Exploration, for his introductory remarks as regards the operations of Delek in the East Med region. Yaniv, what do you consider as being the biggest challenges and risks faced by the oil and gas companies currently operating in the East Med region?
Thank you, Stavros. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And in the context of this day, maybe if you allow me just a couple of personal words. I've been involved in Delek's project in Cyprus since 2011, and I think at least on a monthly basis, probably more than that, visited Cyprus. I've learned to know the people, the culture, observed good times, some more challenging times, made a lot of friends, hopefully less enemies, but a lot of friends. And I must say that it's really heartwarming to see the amazing recovery of Cyprus coming out of a very serious challenge in just 3-4 years ago. Again, being a frequent visitor to the island, you can feel it, you can see it. You can see it in the people, you can see it outside, people are smiling again, and I think this day demonstrates the re-emergence of Cyprus as a player in our region, and especially if you're looking at what I'm responsible for, which is kind of looking at the energy map, and Minister Lakkotrypis put the slide on, it would be great if we can show it again. You know, we are a very small neighborhood, and a very challenging one. And we at Delek, you know, have been there from day one. Just to a historical correction to what Ed mentioned earlier, right? So we were the one who brought Mobil into the East Med. There's a funny. He'll confirm. But the problem, it wasn't called Mobil then. It was called Samadan even, and we brought Mobil then to the Eastern Mediterranean. I'm sure there were times they've regretted answering the phone. I think now less so. We've, as Ed mentioned, had a small discovery. It was huge for us then in Mary B, which supplied Israel of gas for many years. Then had a significant discovery in Tamar, which again, we needed to put some force on Mobil to get them in there, but I guess they were convinced, and I'm sure they're not regretting that. Tamar, seriously, we can't exaggerate the effect Tamar had on the region and on Israel. You know, definitely transformed Israel from an importer of energy to now an exporter of energy and self-sufficient in energy. You know, 2/3 of Israel's energy, both power and industry, are today coming out of Tamar. But it more importantly unlocked a new basin. We've then had Leviathan and then had Aphrodite, and overall over 40 TCF of gas. And for those of you who are not familiar with this terminology, 40 TCF of gas, it's a lot of gas. It's a lot of gas, okay? So, you know, I think the minister heard me say that once. You know, there is the story that we tell in Israel about the late Prime Minister Golda Meir. And, you know, in the context, there were a lot of attempts to find oil and gas in Israel during the years. And, you know, she had a quote that says, you know, when Moses took out the Israeli out of Egypt in bondage, you know, they went through the Sinai desert. Apparently, he took the wrong turn. If he would have taken the right turn, ended up in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, I would probably had, you know, sitting there right now, and life would have been easier. He took the left turn. We ended up in the land of milk and honey, but no oil and gas. Moses was vindicated. So we have oil and gas as well.
He just parted the wrong seas, that's
Sorry?
all. He just parted the wrong seas.
Parted the wrong sea, exactly. So, you know, we needed Mobil to come and drill and find what we found. And obviously Mobil is a very close partner, and we've been doing business in the region and unlocking value and options in the regions for the past almost 20 years. Looking at the map and looking at our neighborhood, there's minister said earlier, this is not the North Sea. And obviously there are geopolitical elements involved, there's macro elements involved. But I must say, you know, we, in our business, we don't have the luxury of not being optimistic. You know, oil and gas companies, we need to be optimistic. If you drill a hole in the sea that costs you $150 million, you better be optimistic, or you're in the wrong business. So we are always on the optimistic side, with all the challenges, and I think that we're proving that we can make it happen. So, you know, the Tamar development, we've just announced a final investment decision on Leviathan, which for me is also a very strong signal to the cooperation that we can do with Cyprus. We are strong believers in Cyprus. We've unfortunately were outbid in all of the previous second and third licensing rounds by recently just by ENI. But we'll keep trying, and eventually we will prevail. As this is our home, and
thank you, Yaniv.
That's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Time is present, so
that's fine.
We do have to.
So what?
Right. Ed. As stated by the Honourable Minister, the most viable option was a regional pipeline to Egyptian liquefaction facilities, either at Damietta or Itku, although he did not rule out the establishment of a liquefaction plant in Cyprus. How feasible is the construction of such a plant in Cyprus?
We are so focused on first of all, the sanctioning of Leviathan, which just happened. That is one of the things that independents do. We focus very much. And we really haven't focused on that issue. I think the idea of Aphrodite and maybe some of the gas from Tamar supplying the Egyptian LNG plants is a part of it. The pipeline that's involved in that is a very doable one. Clearly, from the get-go, a pipeline to Turkey, which would have to go through Cypriot waters, the underwater geography is very rough, and that has always been a very difficult and expensive undertaking to do. And certainly a pipeline going to Europe would be even more expensive. It'd be one of the longest, I think, underwater pipelines carrying gas ever. So, and the issue is who pays for it. If it is a pipeline to Turkey, let's say, carrying gas from Cyprus, and that you would want that to be paid for by the recipient, who could always decide whether or not they want to take the gas. There's a logic in that. But on the other hand, there is a huge desire by Turkey and by the EU to have gas from the Eastern Mediterranean as alternative to the Russians because of the issues they're causing the Ukraine, etc.
Thank you.
May I say something about this issue? As everybody knows, in our history, we prefer pipelines because we consider more reliable, we consider more stable, we consider a very important issue from who produce and who buy the gas. Because it's very important to understand that gas is not easy to manage, because it's very important to understand the market before the production. Because when you take the gas, you have immediately sent somewhere. So European Union have a specific and very important goal to diversify the supply, because as everybody knows, the supply now arrives from the east, from Russia, and from the west, from Algeria. Let me say, it's not my word, but I consider it right. We, inside the EU, we have built probably the perfect market. But about energy, about gas, outside EU, we are favorite the perfect monopoly. So, if we insert in this picture another opportunity to supply gas Europe, probably we help the people to have energy, the access to energy to a very affordable price. And for us, pipelines is a good opportunity in this area, in this issue for Cyprus.
Thank you, Gianni.
Stavros, I might add to that as well. Obviously, one of the attractions for LNG is broadening the access to markets. And one of the things that we see as we look out over the next 20 or 30 years is a growing demand for LNG in Asia Pacific, even into Europe, into Latin America. So there's clearly an attraction. But in terms of the feasibility, it's quite early days, as I mentioned before. What you need first is to assess the resources that you have. You would need gas discoveries of a significant size. You'd need those discoveries to be pretty well concentrated and not diffuse. So really the next step is to get in and categorize what we have, and hopefully we'll have some success and have a breadth of options to consider in terms of how to monetize those discoveries.
Thank you, Jay. And the last question to Yaniv. Considering that the price of oil and gas remains at relatively low levels, and oil and gas companies incurred huge losses during the last couple of years. Is there still enough capital to invest in the East Med?
I think looking at our region, looking at Egypt, looking at Cyprus, looking at Israel, I think today we're probably the most active region in the world, both for exploration and for development. And the reason is, when you look at it relates to your previous question about LNG versus regional sales versus pipeline. You're looking at the region, and most of the countries in the region have very high GDP growth rates. All of them are short gas. All of them are importing gas today, and they're not sufficient gas. They're very strong, call it economic and commercial fundamentals to justify development. And at the end of the day, to make a project work, you need gas sales agreement. You need the ability, based on those gas sales agreement, to finance these projects. I think we have just recently demonstrated that we can, even in these challenging times, take a mega multi-billion-dollar investment decision. We hope to do the same with the second phase of Leviathan and the first phase of Aphrodite relatively soon, targeting Egypt, as was mentioned here, both the LNG facilities, idle LNG facilities, and the domestic market. What we also need in conjunction with that is to find synergies and to find ways to optimize our development plans, to save on capex. This is why we are strong believers and leading the idea of the regional cooperation and sharing of infrastructure, especially between Israel and Cyprus as it relates to the export of gas.
Okay.
If I may
Thank you,
just
Yaniv.
add quickly to that.
Very quickly.
Yes, that Delek was very focused on regional sales. At the start, there was a focus by the project in Mobil on LNG sales and between pipelines and regional sales, and it was the pipelines and regional sales that won. Delek was right about that, and our joint venture that we were thinking with Woodside that had expertise in LNG went by the wayside, and the regional sales were the key to the marketing.
Well, with that, we conclude this session on energy. I would like to thank all the panelists for their interesting and insightful remarks.